Today we will be led by no other person than Mr. Damilola Decker. Mr. Damilola Decker is Program Officer, Civic Space Strength at Global Rights, and has done extensive research on civic space strengthening and the impact of hate speech on social cohesion. So Damilola will just generally give an overview of how hate speech impacts social cohesion, the triggers for hate speech, and what we need to do as a nation, the legal implication of hate speech and what we need to do as a nation. And of course, we'll take contributions from others present in the room, because it's a conversation and not a lecture. Mr. Decker, are you ready?
Yes, ma'am, I am. I just wanted to confirm if everybody can hear me.
We can hear you clear. Please go ahead.
I'm so sorry about putting on my video. The network here is not particularly good, so please bear with me. Good morning, all. Thank you very much for joining this very, very important conversation that comes at a very, very important time in our national life. As Dr. Magoma noted, this is the third in a series of conversations we have been having about hate speech and the issue of social cohesion in Nigeria. I don't think you can look at Nigeria's history in context without talking about the issue of hate speech and the impact it's had in our national life. I mean, we have had a civil war, which some people will remark as one of the most landmark moments in our history. And the civil war, the history of the civil war, which took place from 1967 to 1970, can be somehow traced to the issue of hate speech. So with what is happening today, the issues that are going on in the civic space, with the recent end bad governance protests that we had, the elections that we had last year, general elections that we had last year, and the way some people are still feeling about those elections, it's very important that we remind ourselves about the reason why we are Nigeria, why the essence behind us staying together, and how we can stay together, how we can stay united as a country, while tackling this very, very important issue called hate speech. Hate speech, I think, has been defined severally over this series. Can come in various forms. It can be particularly in this day of social media. It can come via memes, it can come via cartoons, it can come via maybe television programs, adverts, things that are not naturally words. It can be just depictions and images that tend to derogate people or put them down on certain characteristics, based on characteristics that they have no control over. So we're talking about things like possibly the ethnicity, the two big ones in Nigeria, ethnicity and religion, things that are just a way of putting someone down or making someone feel less than on characteristics that the person has essentially no control over. The person's race, the person's gender, the person's maybe social status. So, but it's very, very important. Questions about hate speech, to me, I think it's always very, very important to draw a contrast between hate speech, things that we classify as hate speech, and saying things that people don't like. You might not, sometimes, very often, particularly among the political class in Nigeria, what we come to observe is people make comments that are not necessarily, somebody might make a comment in support of a point of view or a position, a policy position that you might not be in favor of. And you find someone who is in an opposing party who rather than offer a counter argument or a counter policy argument to that particular point of view, the person now says, what the other person is saying is hate speech. And so we have to be very, very careful about what we term as hate speech, and what can be termed as hate speech, and what can be termed as just things or points of views or opinions that we generally find that we don't like, or opinions that are not held by general popularity of the population. So that's a very, very important point of view that I think that is very, very important when we come to talk about hate speech. So centering the conversations on the themes of today, we're talking about community-based approaches to countering hate speech, We also talk about the role of civil society in addressing hate speech and promoting tolerance, and case studies, successful and unsuccessful interventions against hate speech. So I would like to kick off center my conversation around the civil society approaches to countering hate speech. And civil society plays a very, very important role, as far as I'm concerned, in bringing national cohesion. We have several civil society organizations working across several thematic areas. But I think in every capacity, because most of them are in the communities, they have a very, very important role in fostering national cohesion and social cohesion and battling the issue, the menace of hate speech. How do you do that? I think a very, very important perspective is history. At Global Rights, for example, now we are currently working on an intervention aimed at bridging the gap between elderly persons and younger persons on the issue of civic space. We find that elderly persons and young persons sometimes have very similar concerns about how things are going, but because of the communication, because there's a gap in communication in how they're trying to express these ideas about what is trying to be achieved, they are not able to meet at the middle or have a consensus to try and bridge the gap and demand for the issues they are trying to demand for. So one of the things we had an intergenerational fireside chat on this particular issue, and one of the things that came out very, very clearly, particularly from the elderly generation, was there's no context of history. History for a lot of young people who are on social media, who are making use of the social media apps to make their demands, which is, for example, now X is a very, very, X, which used to be Twitter, is a very, very viable tool of community organizing right now, because you can put an idea on X and a lot of people can pick it up and it can actually follow into fiscal action, as we saw with the NSAS protest. But elderly people tend to be, because they don't have access to some of these apps, their points of view are kind of missed in that respect. So we're saying, how do you bridge that gap? And they were saying, they spoke about the issue of history, of how history is such an important tool of how teaching history is an important tool in bridging the gap between the old and the young. Many young people are not, I don't want to just maybe make an unscientific guess, but if you had a conversation with some of the young people I've had conversations with, the context around the Civil War, they are not really aware of that. They're just, they know that, okay, there was a time in history in Nigeria for the Civil War. And because an output of the Civil War was that we set up the NYSC program. The major reasons for which the NYSC was set up, which is to build national cohesion, has been lost on them, because they just say, I finished from school, I have to serve my country in this capacity, I have to go for NYSC. What is the logic behind NYSC? What was the need for NYSC? What was the reason why the government felt it was necessary to push people from their locations where they studied to other places to build national cohesion, to learn about other cultures and all that? They don't understand that because they don't understand history. So civil society, I think, a very, very crucial role. I think an opportunity that civil society can capitalize on is trying to use opportunities to teach history, particularly to the younger generation. While we are trying to bring we are trying to build the capacity of the elderly people to communicate and participate in democratic in our governance structure, in our governance systems, via ability to use social media and the likes. We can also build opportunities for the younger and older ones to meet and possibly pass on some history. What is the context behind the Civil War? What led to it? What were the fault lines that were played, or that were pushed, or the buttons that were pushed that eventually led to that catastrophic war that led to the lives of millions of people lost their lives during that very tragic incident? How do we avoid that kind of situation again if we're not concentrating, or we're not happy we're not very putting our history in context? So I think this is just the points I just want to make. I don't know whether there are other contributions along these lines. We're saying what community-based approaches to countering hate speech, the role of civil society in addressing hate speech and promoting tolerance, and case studies, successful and unsuccessful interventions against hate speech. I don't know whether anybody on the call or anybody in this webinar right now has a point to make with regard to addressing some of these issues that I raised. Hello?
Yeah, thank you very much. We are very much with you. So if you have a question, have any contribution at this point, you have the floor. You can raise your digital hand. Then we'll permit you to speak. Okay, I guess there is none for now. I can see a chat. Okay, chat is not has nothing to do with the question raised. Can we continue so that probably at the end we can now take opinions and questions from the participant.
Okay. So speaking on the second point again, which is how the role of civil society in addressing hate speech and promoting tolerance. I think it's very, very important for civil society, particularly as an all of society effort in addressing the issue of hate speech, bringing accountability. It's if you don't bring accountability for what has happened before, or incidents of hate speech that have happened before, that have led to people losing their lives, have led to disastrous consequences for people. You don't make it difficult. You don't make it difficult. You don't make it you don't deter anybody else from continuing in the spiral of hate speech. Our experience, particularly at Global Rights, and where we track these things, is every election season, and you have, particularly during elections, you have politicians, harping on Nigeria's traditional fault lines of religion, of ethnicity, for political gains. I don't know how campaigning, how it seems so difficult to be able to campaign or to make your points about how you can make the people's lives better without harping on those lines in our climb. And we are seeing this thing have disastrous consequences. I mean, Sheikh Lemu, the Lemu report that was released sequel to the post-election violence in 2011 laid the reason, the logic, or the reason for the protest, the violence riots that took place after the election results were announced in 2011 at the feet of the words of certain politicians. They were instigating, or they were saying all manner of things, trying to dream up supporters to vote for them, but at the same time polarizing other people, saying things that were drawing those fault lines, happening on those fault lines of ethnicity and religion. And we saw the disastrous consequences of that post-election violence in 2011. It was a lot of people lost their lives during that. And since then, where's the accountability? You have to ask the question: where is the accountability? Who has been tried? Who has been prosecuted? Who has been which of the victims can we say to have had justice granted to them because of the events of the events that happened in 2011? I mean, let's be very honest. Some of those politicians have moved on to even higher positions, have moved on with their lives. This is how many years since that incident happened, and there has been no accountability. We have the 2022 Electoral Act try to envisage the issue of hate speech, the issue that politicians in the process of campaigning could make use of incendiary rhetoric that could have dangerous effects on national cohesion, could have dangerous effects, violence effects eventually. And it's in 2022 Electoral Act. But we know what happened in the build up to 2023 elections. Spokesmen of popular politicians, came out and said very dangerous things on very public platforms, on X and the likes. And up to today, nobody has been held accountable for that, despite the fact that there exists the legal framework or the legal regime to hold these people accountable. So I think civil society, very, very important role civil society can play is as advocacy for accountability. We can't keep on having this cycle every single election season, even during this before elections or after elections. We can't be having this constant cycle of people in powerful positions, people who have a large reach, who are people of influence, making dangerous statements that could incite violence or could incite someone against another person, or inciting rhetoric, and nothing happens to them. There's no accountability. They move on with their lives. Sometimes they even get promoted. So that is another issue. I think civil society, another area I think civil society can play a major role in bringing accountability, holding the organizations and the institutions that were stated by the law, are given responsibility by the law to hold these people responsible, to bring the accountability, to prosecute them, holding their feet to the fire. That is something that I think civil society can do as well with regards to backing this menace of hate speech and promoting social cohesion. I don't want to be the only one speaking. I don't know whether someone else wants to.
Okay, yeah, exactly. I can see Dr. Akim Siri's hand is up. Dr. Akim Siri, you have the mic.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Damilola, for that. Now, talking about community-based approach to addressing hate speech. We all know that hate speech has become a menace, especially in this present generation. It has become a menace. It started from somewhere. And if we don't go to the roots, it will be a challenge, coping maybe through internet, through X or Twitter or LinkedIn, or for every problem, there are fundamental beginnings. And I think until we begin to engage with individuals, talking about parents, talking about teachers in schools, talking about religious leaders, talking about traditional rulers, and of course, civil society organizations. CSOs, we always have that encompassing role, whether it is community-based or at a larger space. So at the community level, it is important for us to re-educate parents to know what they say to their children, guardians to know what they say to their words. I remember stories that my mom, my dad, my parents told me. They are still in my heart till today. Stories that I had. Thank God they are wonderful people, and they told me good stories, But if you have parents that they tell you that family, the history of that family is that they are minorities in our communities. We don't associate with them. There are communities in the East, there are communities in the West, in every region. And they say, because I know there is a community, there's a particular community in my local government. And not my parents now, because they're educated. Other people will be like, no, don't associate with them. They call them a particular name. I don't want to mention the name here. And I had a senior in secondary school who is from that community, very beautiful and very intelligent. And sometimes when I will relate with her, people will give me they will look at me with the corner of the eyes. Have you forgotten? Have you forgotten? You're not supposed to, be too close with her. And she's so loving, she wants to be friendly with everybody. And then I said, no, my parents didn't raise me this way. They raised me to have a large heart. They raised me to accommodate everybody. Nothing like racism. And I'm talking to you about Nigeria here. So I broke that barrier and I became very close to that, my senior in secondary school. And I discovered there is nothing wrong with her. She's from a very wonderful family. Then there's another particular family again in my community. And then in those days I said, no, nobody associate with them. They migrated. They are not originally from our place. They migrated from, I won't mention the name of where they migrated from because they told us then. They migrated from so parts of the country and then they came here. So they are not actually from us. You know what my father did? My father brought the first son to our house. to live with us and trained him, educated him, and he became, oh my God, very handsome man. He got married from our community, had children, and the children are doing very well. So, it starts from the parents. What do parents tell children? Oh, you see that house, you see that family, this is their history, don't associate with them. Then the teachers in schools, whether at primary level, at secondary level, at tertiary level. Okay, like there are some places now across the globe, and they have a particular perception about Africans. I remember I went to Ireland, and these I will mention because it happened to me. And I was so sad. I went with my children, and some of my children are so fair, you won't even know they are not blacks, And this guy, a white guy, and then he looked at us. We were in the bus together, and he gave us one kind of look like that. Then I pulled my daughter, I hugged her, and I was like, ignore, ignore. That was a body language speech. So sometimes hate speech could even be non-verbal. It could be verbal because it's a speech, but there are some body language that arise as a result of hate speech. So maybe that guy had been taught that Africans are monkeys. Africans evolved from baboons, and it was in their curriculum. We are talking about community-based approach to addressing hate speech. So what do teachers teach in the schools? What do we have in the curriculums? What do we have that are being rolled out at different structures of institution to children? And then it will be there in their mind. They talk to others in that notion. And then going to traditional rulers now, traditional heads, in various parts of the country, we have various heads. We have the traditional heads, we have the emirs, we have even before the emirs, the obas and, the chiefs. And what do they teach about the next community? What do you say about the village that is beside your own village? Oh, don't marry from there. Oh, don't associate with them. Oh, they are like this. Oh, they are like that. So that's another thing. If all this, if the leadership in homes, the leadership in schools, the leadership in the villages, towns, and communities, as well as the leadership in our religious sector, Africans, we are a very religious set of people. Oh, the pastor said this. Oh, the imam said this. Oh, Ifa said this. Kinifawi, So if our traditional rulers will say the right thing, will say things that will foster love, that will foster unity, because you even read on social media what some religious leaders say, hey, you'll be afraid. Some will even come out during elections and say some terrible things, you are afraid, and you're like, where are we going if religious leaders are speaking like this? So the duty of CSOs now in community-based approach to hate speech is for us to keep sensitizing these various stratas, keep educating them. Let's go back to the fundamentals. I usually don't mention the Bible, or what, I'm a Christian. I don't mention the Bible when I'm in meetings like this. But for this purpose, the very first chapter of the Bible, Genesis chapter 1. That's why when I see people behave in certain areas, I say, was it so from the beginning? It was not so from the beginning. It's either the stubbornness or the toxicity in human being that made some laws to come out. It was not so. Everything that God made was beautiful, was peaceful. It was all about peace. It was all about love, fullness of love in my heart towards another person, and fullness of love in the heart of another person towards me. So I think if we CSOs can go sensitizing the stratas of people that have been suggested and mentioned, and having even town hall meetings, having state meetings, having national high-level meetings, just to bring them together and talk more on what they say to the grassroots, what they say to the minds of people who are even tabula rasa, I think it will help us. It will go a long way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Akimusira, for your intervention. Thank you. Let's go back to Mr. Damilola Deka. You have the mic, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aknimushire, for that very wonderful point. It just reminded me of that Nelson Mandela quote where he said, "No one is born hating another person." So at the from a formative stage where you mentioned tabula rasa, where children are a blank slate, essentially being learning and relearning things from their parents, being impacted by their parents, being imprinted upon by their parents and by their community, nature, nurture, what they are learning, what they are seeing, their environment and all that, they're just learning. So I think that's a very, very important stage if you want to combat the issue of hate speech. As she mentioned, we need to start from the beginning. What values are parents impacting on their children? What values are societies, to the society, the community, at the local level, traditional rulers passing on to the young ones? Are you telling them to otherize another person? Are you telling them that this person that looks like this, or this person that is from that community or from this village or whatever is someone that should be otherized, someone you should not hang around with, someone you should not play with, someone you cannot interact with? And when we find that people grow up with these impressions, and it takes sometimes it's very, very difficult. It takes a lot of education and a lot of learning to break those cycles to break those ideas, those very dangerous ideas that have been impacted on them, and they carry out those ideas. They carry on those particular points of view as adults. She also mentioned something I also want to happen, and I think I have to link it to what I said before about teaching history, about impacting on the young ones, the context around the situation, the context around what has gone on in our society, about why hate speech, why hate can lead to very dangerous consequences, why hate another person can lead to very dangerous consequences, which like it or not was actually the logic behind it. I wasn't born at the time, but what I heard was that was the logic behind the NYSC. That's what I read, that's what I researched on. That it's the idea was people from a particular place go to serve somewhere else, they learn about another culture, they interact with another person, and sometimes we find that people get married, cultures tend to mix during that particular period. But like it or not, we have that the exercise has become very cursory, very, very obligatory in Nigeria. You go to school, you after a certain period of university you serve. But we find that most people are not that social cohesion that was the logic and the brain and the logic behind the NYSC has not really seeped into our roots. And I think parents and communities have a very, very important role in passing that. Civil society as well. Back to the issue of civil society. How do we tell these stories? There are some civil society organizations who specialize in making videos in publicity campaigns. I think we have a lot on. They are very, very important issues. There are a lot of issues that we can talk about. We are talking about peaceful protests and peaceful protests and the right to the protection of the civic space is something that is trending along right now. You have issues of gender-based violence. There are so many videos, so many literature about this, publicity campaigns that have been run about this. But I think it's as civil society organizations, this is another way we can particularly pass information across, particularly to the younger ones. How do we design publicity campaigns around this issue, around solving the issue of hate speech, building the ideology behind social cohesion, making it so that young people and who are usually the targets of instructions for politicians, or usually targets of violence during elections, because they're the ones who carry out this violence. They're the ones who carry out these dangerous acts. They are instructed, and if you are paid very, very amounts of money, giving weapons and told to go and hurt someone else, and told to go and kill someone else. How do we do campaigns that make someone think twice before he's instructed to go and carry out that instruction? We can also work with you mentioned traditional rulers, you mentioned religious rulers as well. They play a very, very important role. Nigerians, our fault lines are religion and ethnicity. Nigerians are very, we have the churchgoers and the church going, and the Christians and the Muslims. You have a lot of people who listen, who treat their pastors and their religious rulers as essentially gods. They listen to every single thing they say. They have the same thing at the mosque. Everything that is said by the imam is like the word of God, and they follow those instructions to the letter. So if we can encourage people at that level to speak to the people that attend their institutions, attend their religious institutions, to stay away from these things. Stop making yourself available to be used by politicians or used by dangerous actors for acts of violence. We are all human beings. We all bleed red. And no one is, as back to the Nelson Mandela quote, no one is born eating another person. It is taught. It is something that is impacted at a young age. So the traditional institutions and religious rulers, as well as the community, have a very, very big role to play in addressing the issue of hate speech and building social cohesion. Does anybody else want to speak at this point?
All right. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, sir. We can hear you, sir.
Yeah, thanks so much. Well, I feel greatly honored to be part of this conversation this morning. And I must say yours sincerely that I am particularly gratified or excited with the comments and opinions being shared in the course of the conversation this morning. And I just want to say very quickly that I share the same sentiment of views with the previous speakers, and I would just want to add my voice to all that has been said very quickly. Now, I agree entirely that hate speech undoubtedly is wrong, as it has the capacity or the propensity of threatening the country's unity, the peace, and the efforts of government towards nation building. But in as much as I do not in any way encourage hate speech, I feel very strongly that there is also need for us to do a bit of a contrast between hate speech and fair speech or fair comment. And I know too well that the thrust of the conversation this morning is centered fundamentally on community efforts towards checkmating or checking the scourge of hate speech in the society, how the traditional institution, religious leaders, opinion molders, the family can actually checkmate all of these issues. But notwithstanding, we also need to look at certain fundamental issues. And that is what actually made me to bring the issue of hate speech and fair comment or fair speech to be part of our conversation this morning. Because the truth of the matter is, if you look closely at the ground norm, and that is the 1999 Constitution, particularly Section 14, it tells us primarily the objective of governance. Why do we have government? Or why are we supposed to have government? We are supposed to have government for purposes of providing welfare concerns, for purposes of securing the lives and properties of the citizens of this country. But the question we must ask ourselves very quickly as citizens of this country is that, do we really have government in this country, or do we really have governance in this country? As far as I'm concerned, if you ask me, and I'll tell you, even if you wake me up, I'll tell you that Nigeria is a country where we have government, but we don't have governance. We don't have governance. And one of the incidences of democracy is fair comments, objective comments, fair criticism. And that is what we should pursue. That is what we should advocate. That is what we should canvass, or that is what we should use as a tool to be able to checkmate or to put the government on their toes. Because the government are there today fundamentally to do our bidding. We put them there. But the question is, are they doing our bidding? Are they living up to the expectation? That question, definitely you all agree with me that yes, they are not doing or living up to expectation. Today, Nigeria is regarded as the poverty headquarters in the world. Today, corruption has become our culture, has become our national way of life. Look at the level of poverty, penury, unemployment in the country. But the question now is, should we just develop a mute complexity because there is what they call hate speech and not be able to make fair comments that will make government to be alive to their responsibility? So in as much as I do not in any way support hate speech, I am a proponent, or I am an advocate for fair speech, fair comments that will make the government to be responsible, comments that will make the government to be responsive, comments that will make the government to be accountable, so that they'll be able to deliver governance. And that is what we want in this country. And I pray that God will help us in the name of Jesus. Thank you all.
Excellent points, Doctor. Excellent points, sir. I think you are harping on the point I made earlier, where I said you can comment, you can criticize. Criticisms are not hate speech. Criticisms are not hate speech. Where you somebody is not living up to his responsibilities in any capacity, probably in of ensuring the welfare and safety of the people, and when you comment on that does not fall in the category of hate speech. I think it's also important to raise during this conversation that is this test called the Rabat threshold. The Rabat threshold, because that sorts of clarifies classified especially when it comes to the issue of adjudicating it in courts and bringing accountability, because very often, like I said,
Okay, we are so sorry for that. I think Mr. Damilola is experiencing some network challenges. So hopefully he's going to rejoin. So while he's trying to reconnect with us again, so we still have like 8 minutes to the end of this session. So we can still take comments, questions, and perspectives as regard these issues. So if you have any, kindly put up your digital hand so that the mic can be allowed for you, please. Okay, Dr. Kimisiri, you have the mic, please.
Okay, thank you very much. I actually had more to say the other time, but I wanted more people to contribute. But since that is not happening, I want to say that we must also know that hate speech is not peculiar to Nigeria. It is a global thing. So that we will know when we are trying to address it. Today we are talking about community-based approach to addressing hate speech. Around the world at the moment, we are seeing some disturbing groundswell of xenophobia, racism, intolerance, anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim hatred, persecution of Christians, even a lot of bigotries. And I must say that there are pockets of this in different continents of the world. So with that at the back of our mind, and knowing that hate speech is a menace to democratic values, is a menace to social stability and peace. Because of course, if there are hate speeches everywhere, we can have social stability, you know, the psychological effect and even the economic aftermath of hate speech is something that it's quite enormous. So in having community-based approach, knowing that it's a global thing, I think another important thing we need to do as stakeholders, all of us here, is take responsibility. Take responsibility to foster, you know, good relationship, good behavioral values. Where are our ethics? The ethics that says I should not say to somebody else what I don't want the person to say to me. Ethical values. Anything I don't want to hear, I shouldn't say it to somebody else. Anything I don't want to, anything I feel will hurt me is not something I should say to another person or on a particular platform. So I think it is important for us as individuals, whether we are here in Nigeria or wherever we go, to be mindful of fostering good relationship. The other time I mentioned that we should be peace ambassadors, that if we can help ourselves to be peace ambassadors, to be instruments and agents mobilizing peace wherever we are, whether in our churches, as we have said, or whether in our mosque, whether in our museums, in our wherever we are. We should be instruments. We should take that responsibility to be the ones that will help people to know, again, that it is important for us to be mindful of what we say to another, what we say to a particular group, and the kind of attitude that we put up. Thank you.
Thank you so much once again, Dr. Kimisiro, for the intervention. We have Mr. Damilola Deka back now. Let's have your closing thought. We have 4 minutes to close this conversation, but let's take your final thoughts before we call it a close. Thank you. Mr. Damilola Deka.
Okay, sorry, bear with me. The network here has been really problematic. My final thoughts. I would just tap on some of the points that mentioned about context, about transferring, impacting the younger ones on the issue of hate speech. I think it's so, when people are tabula rasa, as they say, when you are a blank slate, the younger ones as civil society organizations, I think it's something we can promote, particularly at the community level, so that we can battle this menace of hate speech. No one is born hating another person. It's just a way of building national cohesion at that level, encouraging the younger ones. What is being taught in schools, what is being taught in at the local communities about otherizing other people. That's something we can do. As a society organization, I think it's also we need to come up with ways to tell stories that build national cohesion, that build the spirit of patriotism in Nigerians, particularly for the young ones, using social media, using all these TikTok, all these social media apps to try and pass that message across to younger ones, so they can understand the history of Nigeria, the context behind why we are where we are, and what they can do to foster national cohesion and battle the menace of hate speech. I think this would be my final thoughts on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Damilola Deka, and thank you very much, everyone, for your contribution. It's been a very insightful conversation today. And we are going to close now, but to continue next week again with the conversation. Once again, thank you everyone, Dr. Akim. At this level. Everyone, thank you everyone for joining. Your participation is greatly appreciated. Hopefully in the next conversation, we'll be having many participants joining us. I know this session was streamed on YouTube, and believe that we also have participants who have joined via the YouTube streaming this morning. So thank you once again all. Do have a lovely morning and a very wonderful day.